The streets of Manhattan were alive with lights, yet colder than any winter night could feel. Snow fell in thick, silent sheets, smothering the noise of the city. People hurried by, heads down, eyes glued to their phones, oblivious to the small miracles hiding in plain sight. Then, a sudden movement caught the eye of one man. Not just any man, Michael Reynolds, a billionaire CEO whose name alone could open doors anywhere. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about deals, or profits, or the empire he had built. Something tugged at him from the quiet street corner. There, beneath the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, lay a little girl. Alone, huddled under a coat far too big, her tiny hands barely peeking out. Her breath came out in visible clouds, trembling with cold. The city's chaos roared around her, but she seemed untouched, almost like she had been waiting for someone to notice. Michael paused. A million thoughts ran through his mind. How had she ended up here? Where were her parents? Yet, before he could calculate the right course of action, instinct took over. He stepped closer, snow crunching beneath his shoes, and knelt down. The girl's eyes opened slowly, calm, almost eerie in their stillness. They didn't show fear. They didn't plead. They simply watched. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. The words sounded strange in the icy air, almost fragile. "My mommy went to get dinner," she whispered. "But I'm not scared. You hear now?" That one line pierced through him, not because it was dramatic, because it was real, because it carried hope in a place where hope seemed impossible. And then she said it. "You're the miracle." Right? The word hung between them like a delicate snowflake, impossible to ignore. Michael, who had measured life in numbers and returns, felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. A crack in the armor of wealth and ambition. He glanced around the empty street. The world was rushing past, indifferent. But here, right here, time seemed to stop. A choice loomed before him. Ignore it and return to his luxury car, leaving the child to the cold. Or step into the unknown, risk judgment, and perhaps change both their lives forever. He reached out, hand trembling slightly, brushing a strand of snow-dusted hair from her face. She didn't flinch. She trusted him. And in that moment, he realized that no amount of money, no boardroom victory, no high-rise apartment could ever create this kind of impact. The night was silent, except for the whisper of snow and the quiet heartbeat of possibility. Michael knew he had one decision to make, a decision that could ripple far beyond this single street corner. He took a deep breath, one step forward, and everything began to change. Michael extended his hand slowly, as if time itself had slowed for this moment. The girl looked up at him with those calm, unwavering eyes. There was no hesitation in her trust, only a quiet invitation. He took a breath and helped her to her feet. Her small body trembled from the cold, and he realized the coat barely covered her thin frame. The streets around them were deserted, snow piling higher on the sidewalks. Every person passing by seemed absorbed in their own world, oblivious to the tiny miracle unfolding before them. Michael felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in years. Responsibility that wasn't dictated by contracts or boardroom decisions, but by humanity itself. "Do you have anywhere to go?" he asked, his voice steady but soft. "No," she replied simply. "But I'll be okay. With you?" Her words, innocent yet profound, struck him harder than any business setback or triumph ever could. In that instant, the lines between wealth and warmth, power and compassion, blurred completely. Michael realized that real impact wasn't measured in stock charts, it was measured in moments. Like this, he scanned the nearby streets. Nothing looked welcoming. Every hotel seemed sterile, every building impersonal. Yet the little girl didn't seem to need grand gestures. She needed someone who would see her not as a problem, not as a statistic, but as a human being. Michael's mind raced. What if someone saw him? A billionaire wandering with a homeless child? Headlines? Scandal? Questions? But none of that mattered anymore. This was bigger than reputation, bigger than fear. He pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders, wrapping her in warmth, and began walking. The snow crunched under their feet, each step echoing into the night. The city's lights blurred in the haze, reflecting off the icy streets, but nothing could dim the intensity of the moment between them.
"Yep."
"Different," the girl said suddenly, tilting her head. "Most people just walk by." Michael smiled faintly. "Maybe most people are too busy looking at the wrong things," he said. Her gaze lingered on him, piercing yet serene, as they moved. Further, from the bus stop, the quiet streets seemed to transform. The noise of the city faded, replaced by the rhythm of possibility, of human connection. Michael felt a strange exhilaration, like stepping off a cliff but finding solid ground, where there should have been nothing. And then, from somewhere deep within, a whisper of doubt crept in. What if he couldn't help her? What if this small act wasn't enough? But even as the fear whispered, the girl's trust pushed back, stronger than any anxiety, stronger than any logic. For the first time in his life, Michael realized that true courage wasn't in facing boardrooms or markets. It was in facing humanity itself, with all its mess, its fragility, its silent calls for help. And tonight, in this snow-covered street, courage had a name he would never forget. Michael led her down a narrow side street, where the glow of a single lamppost barely cut through the snow. Each step seemed heavier than the last, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what lay ahead. He didn't know where they were going. Somehow, it felt like they were exactly where they needed to be. The little girl's small hand fit perfectly in his. Her trust a fragile lifeline he couldn't break. Her eyes darted around curiously, noticing details Michael had ignored for years, the tattered curtains of a closed shop, the stray dog curled up near a fire hydrant, the way snowflakes clung to branches like tiny crystals. "You always help people?" she asked quietly. Michael paused. Her question cut deeper than he expected. In all his life, he had solved problems, negotiated deals, built an empire, but had he ever truly helped someone just because they needed it? He shook his head. "Not always," he admitted, "but tonight, I think it's time I do." The girl smiled faintly, and that smile carried the warmth of 1,000 suns. It wasn't childish or naive, it was knowing. She seemed to understand the kind of man he could be if he chose to step beyond wealth and ego. A sudden gust of wind hit them, biting and sharp, and Michael pulled the girl closer. Her tiny body shivered, and he realized he needed to act fast. The city offered no comfort for someone like her, no warm benches, no safe corners, only doors locked tight, streets empty, and the cold pressing in from all sides. Then through the falling snow, a faint light flickered ahead, a small, unassuming doorway. A sign above it read, "Open 24 hours." Michael hesitated, scanning the street. Was it safe? Could he trust this unknown place? But the girl didn't hesitate. She tugged gently, her trust unwavering. They entered. The warmth hit immediately, a small sanctuary of soft light and quiet hums. Michael's chest loosened. He felt the first relief of the night. But as he looked down at her, he noticed her eyes glistened not with fear, but with expectation. "You promised," she said softly. "You're the miracle." Michael froze. Her words weren't just a request, they were a challenge. Could he live up to them? Could he really be the change she seemed to believe he could be? As he led her to a chair near the heater, the weight of the city outside pressed against him again. Every second mattered. Every choice mattered, and somewhere deep in his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in decades began to bloom. Hope. But just as he started to relax, a shadow moved in the corner of the room. Not a person, but a reminder that the world outside was still dangerous. Still, indifferent, Michael knew this night was only beginning, and that the real test of courage, compassion, and humanity was still to come. The little girl curled up on the chair, but Michael could see she wasn't fully comfortable. Her eyes darted to the heater, then to the small counter where a few snacks were stacked. She was safe, yes, but only physically. Emotionally, she was still wary, still carrying a night's worth of loneliness and fear. Michael sank into the seat across from her, trying to mask the storm of thoughts in his head. What if someone came looking for her? What if her mother never returned? He had power, money, influence, but none of that mattered when it came to a child's trust. This was a new kind of responsibility, one that couldn't be solved with a signature or a bank transfer. "I'm Michael," he said quietly, attempting a smile. "What's your name?" "Lila," she replied, her small voice steady but soft. "People say my name means night, but I think it means something else." Like waiting for light, Michael felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from the depth of her words. Waiting for light. She had survived the darkness of the streets, yet she still believed light existed. Even after everything, her hope hadn't dimmed. A sudden sound from outside made him freeze, a distant siren, then the echo of footsteps crunching in the snow. Michael's heart raced. He didn't know if it was someone coming to help or someone who could harm her. He instinctively placed a protective hand over Lila's small shoulder. "Don't worry," he whispered, though his own voice trembled. "I've got you." The girl looked up at him, her eyes reflecting trust that seemed almost impossible for a child who had faced so much. She wasn't asking for reassurance. She was giving it to him. And in that moment, Michael realized something extraordinary. This little girl, lost and alone in the city's cold, had just taught him more about humanity than all his years of wealth, power, and success ever had. But just as a sense of calm began to settle, the door creaked. Michael turned sharply. A shadow appeared in the doorway, a man, his expression hidden, watching them. Panic surged through Michael. Was this someone dangerous? Or could it be her mother finally returning? Before he could react, Lila whispered, "Don't be afraid. I think he's here to help." Michael's instincts screamed, "Caution, bug." The girl's words carried a strange weight. Somehow, he knew she was right. Somehow, he knew that tonight, the miracle they were waiting for wasn't just about shelter or warmth, it was about human connection. The man stepped closer, revealing a kind face and worried eyes. "I saw her outside," he said, voice gentle. "I've been looking all over. Is she okay?" Michael glanced at Lila. Her calm trust met his gaze, silently urging him to do the right thing. And in that instant, he understood that being rich didn't mean he could solve every problem, but being human meant he could choose to act when it mattered most. And sometimes, just sometimes, one small act of courage could set off a chain of miracles no money could ever buy. The man's face softened as he approached Lila. Relief washed over him, but Michael felt a flicker of unease. Something about the intensity in the man's eyes told him this wasn't just a random passerby, it was someone deeply connected to her life. Someone who had been searching, hoping, fearing, all at once. "Is this her?" the man asked, voice almost trembling. Lila nodded, clutching Michael's coat for warmth. The man exhaled sharply, a mixture of fear and relief colliding in a single heartbeat. "I've been looking everywhere. I didn't know if I'd find her before the night, before the cold got to her." Michael realized then how fragile human life can be. Here was a moment that could have ended tragically. A child, alone on the streets, invisible to a city that moves too fast to notice miracles. And yet, through a single choice, through stepping forward when the world passed by, he had changed the course of that night. But the story wasn't over. Lila looked at Michael, her small eyes shining with trust and gratitude. "You're my miracle," she said again. Her words, repeated, weren't just a label. They were a recognition of courage, of empathy, of humanity itself. Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. He had spent decades thinking wealth and power defined success, but this moment, this human connection, redefined it all. The man knelt down, gathering Lila into his arms. Relief, exhaustion, and gratitude blended into a single, overwhelming emotion. He turned to Michael, eyes searching. "Thank you," he said simply. "You saved her. I don't know how to repay you." Michael shook his head. "No repayment needed. Just don't forget that sometimes, small acts that seem meaningless change everything." Lila nestled closer to the man, and Michael watched the two of them, realizing that what had begun as a cold, lonely night had transformed into a story of hope, trust, and human kindness. And yet, even as he felt the warmth of that transformation, a quiet thought nagged at him. How many others, like Lila, were out there, waiting for someone to notice, waiting for a hand to reach out, for a heart to act? The snow continued to fall outside, silent and relentless. Michael lingered in the doorway, watching the glow of the heater light up the small room. He understood something vital. Wealth can open doors, influence can create opportunity. But the real miracle comes from courage, compassion, and the choice to act when it matters most. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just a man with power. He was a man who had witnessed the raw, unfiltered impact of humanity in doing so. He had been changed forever. But as he turned to leave, a final thought struck him, one that would haunt him and inspire him in equal measure. What if every person who had the ability to act chose to step forward, just once? What would the world look like then? The answer shimmered in the snowflakes, in the warmth of the room, in Lila's trusting eyes, and it was breathtaking. Michael stepped out into the snow again, the city lights sparkling like diamonds across the frozen streets. The cold bit at his face, but it no longer felt threatening. It felt alive, electric, as if the night itself was acknowledging what had just happened. He realized something profound. Sometimes the world forces you to pause, to notice, to be human. The image of Lila stayed with him, the calm, trusting eyes of a child who had survived alone, who still believed in miracles. Her small words had pierced a life of calculation and precision, reminding him that no matter how much money or power you have, real influence comes from compassion, from seeing the unseen, from stepping into someone's world when they need. Emo stopped as he walked through the silent streets. Memories of his own childhood stirred moments of fear, uncertainty, times he had longed for someone to notice him. And suddenly, everything became clear. This wasn't just about helping a child. It was about breaking cycles of loneliness, about choosing humanity over convenience, empathy over indifference. He paused near the bus stop where he had first seen her. The bench, now blanketed in snow, seemed ordinary, but to him, it was a place of transformation, a place where one moment, one decision, had rippled outward to change lives. Then, as if the city itself wanted to remind him of the stakes, he noticed a shadow moving across the street. Another child, alone, shivering, invisible to the passersby. Michael froze, heart pounding. Could he ignore it this time? Could he let another miracle slip by, unnoticed? Without hesitation, he moved forward. Every instinct, every lesson from that night propelled him. The warmth of Lila's trust, the knowledge that small acts create immense impact, it fueled him. He understood now that humanity isn't just about grand gestures, it's about noticing, stepping in, and taking responsibility when it matters most. Michael reached the child, extending a hand once more. And in that moment, the city seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if someone would act, waiting to see if another spark of compassion would ignite. He didn't hesitate. The child's eyes met his, mirroring the same trust, the same fragile hope he had seen in Lila, and for a moment, the world felt endless, filled with possibility. Because Michael had learned a truth more valuable than all the wealth he had accumulated. Real miracles don't come from money, they come from courage, from empathy, from the choice to see someone when everyone else turns away. And tonight, that lesson was no longer theoretical. It was alive, vibrant, unstoppable. Morning broke slowly over Manhattan, soft pinks and golds spilling across snow-covered streets. The city stirred, oblivious to the small miracles that had unfolded in its silent corners the night before. But Michael couldn't forget. He walked through the light-dusted streets, every step a reminder of what had changed not just for Lila, but for himself. He arrived at his office, the glass towers gleaming in the dawn, and paused. The world of power, wealth, and prestige stretched before him, but something inside had shifted. Deals and numbers felt hollow. They had always been his measure of success, but now he understood. The true measure was human impact. One choice, one moment, one act of courage that could ripple outward in ways no spreadsheet could capture. Michael pulled out his phone. A message awaited him. A photo of Lila, smiling, wrapped in warmth, her tiny hand raised in a wave. A note attached. "You're my miracle." Tears blurred his vision. He had built empires, but this human connection was a triumph far greater than anything he had ever achieved in boardrooms or balance sheets. And as he stared at the photo, he realized something extraordinary. Miracles aren't reserved for the lucky. They are created by those willing to notice, willing to act, willing to care. That night, and every night after, Michael made a vow. He would never pass by someone in need again. He would use his influence not just to grow wealth, but to grow humanity. Every decision he made, every choice, would carry the weight of compassion he had discovered in a single child's trusting eyes. And somewhere in the city, Lila grew up, knowing that she had been seen, truly seen, in a world that often looked the other way. She would carry that trust forward, a ripple of hope spreading quietly but powerfully through the lives of others. Michael looked out over the skyline, snow melting into puddles along the streets. He smiled. The night had taught him something invaluable, that every life matters, that courage isn't loud, it's quiet, patient, it's bending down to lift someone up when the world walks past. The city was still bustling, still indifferent, but now he knew how to make it different. One act, one moment, one choice, and maybe, just maybe, the world could finally begin to feel a little warmer, a little brighter, one miracle at a time, because in the end, it isn't money that changes the world. It's humanity.